Number 1. Last time camping. I used to really love camping. There's just something about being out in nature. One of the nicest feelings is to wake up in a tent from the sun shining through the fabric, or listening to the animals make noises to wake you up. But unfortunately, about 5 years ago, I had an awful experience camping that ruined the experience for me. I haven't camped since. I was out by myself, as is usual when I go camping. I got pretty deep in the camping area too. I wanted to spend as much time alone as possible. However, on the very first day, I noticed that a guy set up camp really close to me. I was uncomfortable because there was so much space that he didn't have to do this. Also, he was a pretty freaky looking guy. He was big, and he had this enormous hunting knife. I saw him twice, using the tip of the knife to pick things out of his teeth. He would watch me too, which just creeped me out. And he'd always be messing around with that huge knife. It was almost as if he wanted me to know he had it. But the biggest issue was that he camped so close to me. It made me very uncomfortable, and I didn't feel good about leaving my tent and going anywhere. His presence was ruining what was the best part of camping for me, being alone with nature. After a day of putting up with that, I just decided to go ahead and move my tent. He noticed that I was packing up, and again kept watching me do it. As usual, he really didn't talk to me. He just eerily watched me, playing around with that damn knife. I didn't talk to him either, and figured he likely thought that I was done with my camping trip. I hiked for a while, found myself a nice campground, and set up camp there. Later, I was going to go down to the creek in order to do some fishing. However, upon approaching the creek, I saw that the guy was over there as well. I went further down the creek so as to avoid him. I set up and then had a good afternoon fishing. On my way back to the camp, I noticed that the guy must have quit fishing. He was nowhere to be seen, and I was grateful for that. I think I'm a decent judge of character, and he just gave me a very bad feeling. As I got back to camp, I got the shock of my life. The moment that my campsite came into view, I saw that he was there. He was facing away from me. He was unzipping my tent and looking inside, and the large hunting knife was in his hand. Quickly, I hid behind a tree and tried to keep myself from being seen. I could hear him moving around, and I was a bit too terrified to peek around the tree and see what he was doing. I heard some ripping noises and some clanging noises, and the guy swearing more than once. Then finally, after what seemed like forever, I heard him walking, and I hoped it was away from me. It took some time just to make sure the coast was clear before I finally braved looking from behind the tree. My campsite had been destroyed. My tent was ripped to shreds, and he had broken a lot of my property. It was clear that he had used that big knife to rip up my tent. I had to leave the majority of my things there. It was most important to get out of the woods safely and then report the guy. So as I made my way, I kept praying that I wouldn't run into the guy again. Every noise was him. Leaves crunching, sticks breaking. At every moment, I expected the man to either jump out from behind a tree or to grab me from behind. But fortunately, I got out and reported the guy to a ranger. I also had a ranger escort me back to my campsite, and they found the guy and arrested him. Unfortunately, he didn't get charged with anything but vandalism since he hadn't attacked me. But even then, he destroyed any liking I had for camping. Number 2. The closest call. I have no idea why this happened to me. I have no idea who did it to me either. All I know is that it was the most terrifying moment in my entire life. I went camping in an area that I had been camping to several times. In fact, I had been going there more than once a year for quite a while. I just needed to get away. So I set up camp and tried to have a few relaxing days. This was a common and very used camping area. The first night in my tent, something woke me up. I didn't grab for my flashlight though. I just listened. It sounded like it could be a person, perhaps even more than one person. The footfalls were all around my camping area. I gave no indication that I was awake. After about 15 minutes, whoever or whatever was out there was gone. I was able to convince myself that it may have just been a deer or two, and after a very long time, I was able to finally go back to sleep. The following day, I checked around the campsite. Nothing was out of place. There really was no indication that anyone had been there. As I had mentioned, there were many people camping in this area, so it could have just been another camper doing something completely harmless. So I successfully put it out of my head. Nothing happened for the next few days, and about 3 nights afterward I got woke up again. This time, I heard more, and someone was coming towards my tent. I knew it was a person this time. I kept a hunting knife with me, however. Scrambling around in the tent, I noticed that I must have left it outside. I sweared, just when my tent started shaking. True fear gripped me, and I wasn't sure what to do. There seemed to be more than one person, and they were messing around with my tent poles. In just a few moments, I felt the tent collapse on me. They were taking it down. I began yelling for help. I figured someone had to hear that. However, one guy began dragging my tent. The other guy kicked me to stop me from yelling for help. It, however, didn't stop me. I was scared for my life, and there was no way that I would not be screaming for any help I could get. Each scream earned me a kick. Between that and being pulled along the ground, I was in a lot of pain. Suddenly, though, the pulling and kicking stopped. There was someone else out there. I heard the new person say something, and then the guys messing with my tent told him to mind his own business. I began yelling for help, and when I did, I heard a gunshot ring out. Only problem was, I didn't know if the gun was shot by the new person or one of the guys who were dragging me. I then felt the tent get dropped, and the guys who were apprehending me ran off. After a few moments, the new man with the gun got my tent opened and helped me out of it. And the guy was enormous. He looked like Ogre from the Revenge of the Nerds movies. But even scarier was the gun, and he definitely looked like he would have used it. Anyhow, I thanked him, and he offered to either help me get back to my camp or go after the guys. I chose to go back to my camp, pack up, and leave. The guy who helped me claimed to know the guys who were kidnapping me or whatever they were doing, and assured me he would take care of it. I packed up and left. Number 3. The cabin. Okay, first off, I'm not the paranoid type at all. I am, in fact, the exact opposite. I'm also extremely comfortable being by myself in the woods. Very often, I'll spend a week or so all by myself at my family's cabin. I love the seclusion. It's in the Appalachian Mountains, which are amazingly beautiful. It is pretty far away from everything, though. I always have to bring plenty of food with me, because it is just too inconvenient to go all the way to the store while being out there. However, one time while I was staying at the cabin, I had quite a terrifying experience. This was about 5 years ago. My first night in the cabin, I began feeling like I was being watched. I'm not sure how else to describe it, but anyone who has had it happen will understand what I mean. It's eerie, and for some reason the feeling cannot be shaken. The very first night, I just decided I was having an off day, and tried to forget about it. I felt fine during the day, but when it got dark, and I was in bed reading a book, it happened again. I felt like someone was watching me, and it made it very difficult to enjoy my time. After a while, I decided to get up and take a look around the cabin. I honestly did not think anyone was out there, but I went ahead and took my gun anyway. Looking outside with a flashlight, I saw no indication that anyone was or had been there. I again wrote it up to me just being paranoid, which I've already mentioned that I do not have a tendency to be so. I looked out at my car, under my car. I walked around the cabin and some of the trees. Absolutely nothing was disturbed. I eventually went back in the cabin, locked up, and went back to reading my book. It was a little harder getting to sleep this time. The third night was much the same. I was getting frustrated beyond belief. I had come out there to relax, and although I was having a nice time during the day, I was not feeling restful at all at night. It was really aggravating, and I also felt that I was ruining my own vacation by letting my mind play tricks on me. I went into the front room of the cabin and read on the couch instead. There were heavy drapes over the windows of that room, and closing them brought me a little bit of relief. Still, I couldn't completely let go of that annoying feeling. Once again in the morning, I looked around outside the cabin, and I didn't see any proof that anyone had been there. However, I wasn't getting any real relaxing done, so I decided to just drive home. At least then I could maybe sleep better. So I packed up and began to drive home. I was out for about an hour when I made a realization. I had left my gun in the cabin. I didn't like not having it on me, so I knew that I had to turn around and go back to the cabin. When I arrived there, even though I had only been gone for about 2.5 hours at the most, I noticed right away that there was damage done to the cabin. Several of the windows were broken, and the door was open. I had to assume that someone broke in and was possibly still in the cabin, so I turned around and drove back to the main road and went directly to the police station. 2 officers gave me a ride back to the cabin. I remained in the car, where they went in and checked it out. And when they verified that no one was in there, they came and asked me to come and look around and see if anything was missing. The only thing missing was my gun. But that wasn't the scary thing. When I looked in the bathroom, I saw someone had written a message for me on the medicine cabinet. "We're coming back." Well, they did come back, but I wasn't there. 2 police officers were, though. I found out that 2 young men, only 19 years old, had been occasionally breaking into and staying in the cabin. On the night that I arrived, they were outside and watching me through the windows. I guess seeing me with the gun was the reason that they never tried to do anything to me. That was why they came in and took my gun. But when they came back for me, they got the shock of their lives. I mean, seriously, what did these 2 idiots expect me to do? Did they think that leaving that note wouldn't convince me to go to the police? I'm not an idiot. Unfortunately, they only got charged with breaking and entering. They weren't brought up on Virginia's breaking and entering with intent charge, since I had already left the dwelling. Hey all, Killer Orange Cat here. If you like this video, please let me know by hitting the like button. If you're not already subscribed to Killer Orange Cat, please consider hitting the button below, or wait for the button of Ichigo that will appear at the end of this closing. Leave me a comment to let me know what you thought of the video, and consider sharing it with someone you think might enjoy it. You can always follow Ichigo and myself on Facebook and Twitter. If you have a story you'd like narrated on Killer Orange Cat, please email it to the address included in the description. Just please know, the one requirement I have is that the story is original and has not appeared on any other channel. In the meantime, don't forget to make sure to check in your closet and check under your bed, because you never know where Killer Orange Cat might be hiding. Good night.